Good evening, good afternoon, good morning, good whatever time it is, wherever you are, whoever you are. Welcome once again to Full Fat Spoiler Chat, the show in which we, the folks at Nerd Caliber, talk about a recent piece of nerdy entertainment. And usually, what we do is we break it down and talk about what we like about it, what worked for us, what we didn't like about it, what didn't work. We look at bigger themes, overall, the tone of the piece, messages that are trying to come out of it, things like that. That's a little different than what we're going to do tonight, because tonight we're actually going to be covering Volume 3 of Love, Death, and Robots, the Netflix, it's called speculative fiction anthology series that started in 2019. Because there are multiple episodes or stories, it's an anthology, that run anywhere from 7 to 21 minutes is the longest one. It doesn't really work for us to do it that way, or for me to do it that way, so I'm going to basically just do sort of a what did I like best about the overall structure of these particular episodes, which ones were my favorites and why, which didn't work if they didn't. Because of that, I will probably tell a little bit of spoilerage about some of these things, because to tell what worked, I have to tell something about the plot or the story or so on. So, I mean, it's technically still full fat spoiler chat. It's just not the normal format of the show. Be warned, I'm not going to shy away from spoilers about any particular aspect of any given story within Volume 3 of the anthology, or any of the previous two if they happen to come up as a comparison. So, with that, we will be talking about Love, Death, and Robots, or I will be talking about Love, Death, and Robots. I'm Rodney Brown. I'm the editor-in-chief of Nerd Caliber. I am first-person shooter on Facebook and Instagram as a cosplay photographer, Burley_adopter on Twitter, a couple of other places, doing various things. So, before we get into talking about this particular volume, the latest one, that dropped just the end of this past week, I'm going to do our usual promo. So, Twitch, if you have an account, we'd love to have you follow us. It's at that URL right there, twitch.tv/nerdcaliber. We do our live shows when we do them, on YouTube Live, on Facebook Live, and on Twitch, and we're trying to build up our Twitch following to be sort of like the other two, which are quite successful. Still not really up into the upward curve of the hockey stick there on our Twitch followers. So, twitch.tv/nerdcaliber. If you have an account at Twitch, please consider following us. All right. Oh, and welcome already, Habibi. Welcome to the show. And I think that's the only one we have on the chats right now, or at least that's chatting on the chats. If you are in watching the show right now live and are in the chats, then absolutely feel free to weigh in on your opinion about any of the things that I'm going to talk about Love, Death, and Robots Volume 3. Or if I don't bring it up, what you like particularly about any particular aspect of it. All right, so the first thing, what did I like about it? Overall, one of the things I really liked about it is the fact that there are 9 episodes this volume. So the previous volume cut way back from to 8 episodes from what was the original Volume 1 was 18 episodes. And no question, I think we said this at the time, that is just way too many. It was a slog to get through all of them, put it that way. Many of them were absolutely fantastic in that first volume, set the tone for the whole thing, certainly. But it was just too many episodes. So when they scaled it back to 8, I thought that was too little. 9 is better. I think 9 or 10 is kind of their sweet spot. They could probably even go up to 12 and have it almost like an anime core, where it's 12 episodes a season or 12 episodes a core. And I think they could, that would work for them. But keeping it or expanding it a little bit past last season, I think is good. I like the variety and the quality of the animation. One of the things about the first season is that the animation quality was kind of all over the board, or the first volume. It was a little bit more consistent, even though there was quite a bit of different variety in the second volume. But the second volume had other issues that I wasn't crazy about. And this is more consistently outstanding, even though it's really varied. I mean, you go everything from this almost humanoid realistic, but clearly, cartoonesque because of shape of features and so on, from episode 2, Bad Traveling, to right after that, episode 3, you've got this almost Linklater like animation style in the episode The Very Pulse of the Machine that is just beautiful, beautiful, line art 2D animation. It's absolutely fantastic. All the way to, the stuff that's been all over every particular article or piece about this volume. The final episode, look at that. It's hard to describe how beautiful this thing is. Just that one, this image, this screen grab, and this is right from the particular story, is stunning in its detail, in its beauty, in its color. And that isn't even close to what is the most amazing thing about that episode. It's absolutely outstanding how fantastic, high quality. Utsav, episode 3 reminded me of old comic art style. Yeah, actually, it kind of does. It looks a lot like, a little bit updated in the designs of the spacesuits, and they could be right out of The Martian. As in addition to the rover and all the other things. But yes, it is very much like some of the old comics. I would say, given the nature of the line work, and this is the episode that Utsav on Facebook is referring to, The Very Pulse of the Machine, I would say maybe actual early 2000 AD or heavy metal, European comics art style. I could see this in an actual issue of like a late 70s heavy metal or 2000 AD. It is gorgeous. Absolutely wonderful. I need to find out where the heck I am. That's not me. That's not me. There I am. So I love that animation style. Yeah, definitely heavy metal. I really got serious heavy metal vibes out of it. So I love the animation style. I love the quality of all the stories. I think this is probably the most consistently high quality storytelling of all 3 volumes. And some of that has to do with the nature of how it gets adapted. John Scalzi has yet another story about his 3 robots wandering post-apocalyptic Earth where all the humans are dead. And it's funny, as Scalzi's first one was in Volume 1, and probably even funnier. And he adapted his own story for screenplay this time. I think he might have been the first time too. But whoever is doing the adaptation in this volume, most of it was done by the guy who did most of the adaptations in the other volumes. So I guess I can't say they've got a better adapting writer. But sometimes in the previous volume, if you're trying to adapt, almost any J.G. Ballard story, but certainly The Drowned Giant, and in this case, Tim Miller did the adaptation himself, who was one of the people behind, one of the executive producers behind creating this entire series. It was a fascinating story to read when I read it, but adapting it into an actual visual art style, a cartoon, if you would, it just, it doesn't work. It's one of those stories that you read and you put it down and you go, huh, wow, huh. And that's really difficult to do directly translating into a visual medium. There are other things about visual media that makes you sit down and go, huh. The Green Knight, most recently, is one of those that does an amazing job with the visual storytelling techniques of afterward, you kind of sit back and go, wow, really? That was interesting. I don't think that they did a good job in the end of Volume 2 with the last episode, which was The Drowned Giant. Which is no knock against Tim Miller. He tried. But again, it's the kind of story that you just can't do. Now, having said that, the next to the last episode in this Volume 3, in Vaulted Halls Entombed, which sort of has a similar aesthetic to it toward the end, where a group of Marine Special Operations Command soldiers going into a cave to try to rescue some people from insurgents find some sort of super weird, maybe alien, it's hard to say. Ultimately, it turns out that it's probably some sort of eldritch, elder, Cthulhu-esque god that's been entombed there, chained there. And it, it has this sense of some gigantic power, but it translates much better into a visual story because it's an action story, realistically, that turns into essentially a horror story. And Ballard's is literally an analysis of how people deal with death, which again works really better as a written story than trying to portray it as a cartoon. So I think consistently all of the stories are better. The one with the very heavy metal cartoon vibe to it, the very Pulse of the Machine, is really good. It's good hard sci-fi that takes a curve away from that, very much like The Expanse, actually. Those spiders gave me serious arachnophobia. So in the second episode, Bad Travelin', which is horror, but kind of fantasy horror. I mean, it's set in a world that is definitely not our world, but it's really close. There's this giant crab, part of the thing, winds up on a ship, and eventually has babies. Why do the babies look like lice? Ugh. I mean, that's one of the creepiest. Later on, the science fiction story Swarm, which is number 6 in this block of 9, is also really super creepy ultimately, and very bug-like, and it's alien creatures and so on. But it's not quite the just straight up monster horror that Bad Travelin' is. That's a monster story. And a really good one. Again, and that's the one with the almost photorealistic, not very realistic looking, humans, like in this story. This is the protagonist? It's kind of hard to call him a protagonist. But I guess the main focal point, the point of view character, let's put it that way, pardon me for a drink, of that particular story. But others, let's see if we get some others here. You've got this straight up traditional Western cartoon, again, military sci-fi action story, which is a lot of humor. I had no idea. So in Swarm, it was instantly, if you recognize her voice, it was instantly recognizable that one of the main characters is Rosario Dawson. No question. In Vaulted Halls Entombed, it was really easy to tell some of the Marines, the Marine Special Operations Command, Special Forces, thank you, there's the word, or term, because they are modeled after, I didn't get any shots of their faces, I should have, they are clearly motion captured and modeled after the actors. So, Joe Manganiello, the minute you see him and then hear him, it's like, oh, well, okay, wow, it's Joe Manganiello. Jai Courtney, there are a couple of moments when, he's got a few, funny lines, and you go, oh, look, it's Boomerang. except he's doing it in his American accent. Um, I couldn't tell, although I recognized the voice. I couldn't tell until I looked it up that the primary lady soldier character in this is Christian Serratos. Um, but then in going back to the one with the cybernetic killer bear thing here, um, Kill Team Kill, the the team is Joel McHale, Seth Green, Gabriel Luna, Steve Blum, and Andrew Kishno. The last two really well known as voice actors in cartoons and video games and so on. But Joel McHale, Seth Green, and Gabriel Luna, like obviously that's the funny one, or one of the funny ones. And there are some very funny stories within this particular volume. So those are my larger overall things that I thought really made this particular volume. I keep wanting to say season because it is something you watch, but they want to go with like the book anthologies and their volume 1 and volume 2, so volume 3. So I'll let them have that if I can remember to do it. So yeah, those are the things that I particularly like as an overall sense of this volume. They picked good stories or wrote good stories. In some cases, it's original stuff. They consistently had amazing animation throughout all of it. Even the one, Night of the Mini Dead, is a stop motion animation with little tiny miniatures, kind of recreation of sort of Night of the Living Dead, except it goes way worse after that. And it's only 7 minutes long, and it's just hilarious. There's no actual dialogue. It's kind of voice. Well, that's not true. Whoever portrays the president, and they don't give any cast listings here, does actually have recognizable things he says. But otherwise, it's mostly just voices. So that one's hilarious. So individually, what are my favorites? It's kind of hard to say. I really liked The Very Pulse of the Machine. It's the voice of the main character, Martha Kivelson, the surviving astronaut on this team that's exploring the surface of Io, is Mackenzie Davis. And she does a very good job, but it's also just really creative, beautifully animated, very interesting science fiction, fairly hard science fiction. Going all the way to, describing very accurately, as far as we know, even up to this point, the nature of what being on the surface of Io would be like. With the understanding that they're in spacesuits that the radiation from Jupiter alone would kill somebody in probably minutes. So that's a little bit, but I can forgive that because otherwise it's a great story and otherwise scientifically very accurate. I really liked Bad Traveling as much as it skeeved the bejesus out of me. As much as the protagonist, the point of view character, is just a horrible person. It's it's beautifully done. It's directed by David Fincher. So this whole thing is created by Tim Miller of Deadpool and David Fincher. The director David Fincher. So and he directs this Bad Traveling, which is why it's really good. It also has Troy Baker, Elodie Young, let's see, who else do I know here for Jason Fleming. Just a whole bunch of, again, fairly well-known, or in case of Troy Baker, incredibly well-known voice actors. And they do a fantastic job. So that's really good. It's the longest one in here at 21 minutes, and you don't feel its length at all. It's absolutely nail-bitingly tense from start to finish. But the last one, I'm going to say it's pronounced Hibaro, because that's the name of the main character, who is a deaf conquistador knight. And so instead of Jabaro, which is what I was thinking of, if that's his name and he's Spanish, I'm guessing it's going to be Hibaro. And that's the one, again, with this, incredibly beautiful imagery like this. So apparently it tells the story of a bunch of conquistadors who are deep in the jungles of, apparently, officially Puerto Rico, although you're never told this. This is in the description on Wikipedia. They run across this bizarre gold-covered, jewel-covered woman in a lake, a shallow, small lake in the middle of the forest. And she is a siren. She's sort of siren, sort of banshee. It's hard to say, but she definitely has a call that drives all the men insane. And they rush into the lake, trying to kill each other to be the only one to get to her, and they all die and drown. And Utsav brings us. He says, this episode is supposedly not motion captured. I need to double check on that, though. I've read that. Once I saw the siren dancing, and again, this is a big spoiler part, but the Deaf Knight eventually gets his hearing back, which almost drives him insane, and then unfortunately makes him susceptible to the siren's call. As he's being called and pulled in toward her, ultimately to drown, he dances as well. And if they didn't motion capture it, whoever animated this is a genius. The studio is called Pinkman.tv. It's a Spanish studio. They either haven't done enough stuff to get an IMDb, or I'm sorry, a Wikipedia listing. It just occurred to me I haven't looked them up on IMDb. Let me see whether or not they have a listing here. They don't. So I don't know whether they're brand new, whether they just haven't done enough stuff that gets recognized by Western information sources. But it's outstanding. It's astonishing. These images, as gorgeous as they are, don't even come close to capturing the fluidity, the movement, and not just of the people. The forest, the large, fern fronds moving as Hibaro moves through them, the moss sliding as he slides off a gigantic fallen log, the water, just the water, not just in the lake, but the story sort of follows them upstream, up torrents and waterfalls, and it's incredible. Whoever did this is going to just be flooded, absolutely flooded with work, if they aren't already, and I assume they may very well be. Again, I have known nothing about this Pinkman.tv studio. It's mind-numbingly good. They also did an episode in Volume 1, the episode with a lady escaping after witnessing a murder in the opposite building. Oh, okay. Yeah, that makes sense. I can see that. Let me get back to that. Name of that episode was... nope, that's not it. That's not it. That's not it. The Witness. Yeah, Pinkman. And also directed and written by the same guy, Alberto Mielgo. Now, see, this one lists the cast, and that one was clearly, that episode, The Witness, from Volume 1, back in 2019, was clearly motion cap. If not just straight up film that had then been animated over, tweaked by animation. But this has, Emily O'Brien, Ben Sullivan, Matt Yang King, Nolan North was in The Witness. Okay, didn't know that. Somebody, Anastasia Foster. There is no cast listing for Hibaro. That's not true. There is one. And I'm assuming this is Hibaro. Girvan Swerve Bramble. But no casting, and maybe I've got that wrong. Maybe that's the siren. You know what? Now that I realize that's an actual person cast in this, I think I'm gonna look that person up on IMDb and see who it was. Can't be too many Girvans. Yeah, it is. Oh wow, a stunt performer who did stunts on Dune Part 1. But it's definitely the knight Hibaro. Although if you look at him, he doesn't look much like him at all. I would have to say that they probably completely did a different animation of the look of the knight over this guy Bramble's action and motion capture. So I think it's got to be motion capture Utsav. I don't think it could have been that smooth if not. But even if it isn't, again, the rest of the stuff, the water, the leaves, the trees, the ferns, the horses. I mean, the horses are perfect. Yeah, it's just amazing. So of all of them, I would have to say that that last episode, Hibaro, is something that you need to see. And I liked the director and writer's first work, and again, thanks Utsa for pointing that out. Back in Volume 1, The Witness, I thought it was really good and really innovative, but this is just amazing. And that, that's what, 2 given production cycles, it's 2 years difference, 3 years maybe. Now, if we're going to go with that, which ones didn't I like? It will sort of stick to our usual full fat spoiler chat of likes and dislikes. Which ones didn't I like so much? There isn't a one in this that I didn't particularly enjoy. I thought that I was a little too skeeved out about Swarm, but I really thought it was smart, a really interesting and good story. Night of the Mini Dead was funny, but was really just 7 minutes of, well, that's silly. Yeah, I don't know. I love Scalzi, and I thought there are reasons why I really liked Three Robots Exit Strategies, which was the opening of episode, opening story of this volume. And the new version of one of the same characters who were in a story in Volume 1. But it's probably not my most favorite as far as entertaining goes. I thought Mason's Rats was hilarious. So here's another thing that I like that I forgot to get into in the overall stuff. Volume 2 really dialed back on the violence and the gore. And to some extent, the action. They were still very action-filled. Snow in the Desert was very action-filled. But Volume 1 had some episodes that were just brutally, violently bloody. Soul Suckers, the very simply animated one, of vampires. The very first one, Sunny something, about the transforming creature controlling, it's Sunny's Edge thing that fights in these underground monster fight things. Really super violent. This volume 3, jumps way back into the violence, like really deeply. Lots of gore. There are body parts. There are internal body parts. There's stuff splattered everywhere in this. And talking about, Mason's Rats, those poor rats, that's a gore fest for rats. But, if you hate seeing small animals get hurt, don't watch that episode. So I like the fact that it got back into the hardcore action, violence, and gore. I thought that was very cool. So there isn't really any particular episodes I didn't like. So I can't say that I have a dislike in particular about this. Um, the so is there an overall theme or tone or message? Well, they're 9 completely different stories, but yeah, there's a few that are particularly consistent. Um, the first one, for sure. So the three robots exit strategies tells the story of the robots. Now they've sort of discovered where the very last humans were, and of course they were the richest humans. And it was, the three different ways that the very richest of the rich decided to try to live out or past whatever disasters were going on. One was setting up an independent nation in an old oil rig, out in international waters. That, of course, didn't go well. Another was, living underground in what's essentially, I can't think of the name of it, the giant nuclear bunker in the Colorado mountains. And that didn't go, technology failed. So that didn't go. They all died. And the last one was, the humans trying to escape via spaceships, which look remarkably like Starship from SpaceX. And those were available. They're trying to colonize Mars for some reason. Only available to the 0.1% of the 1% richest people on the planet. And of course, it doesn't work. And then you get all the way to the end, where Hibaro is clearly about colonizers. They're the conquistadors. It's in Puerto Rico. It's about the murder, exploitation of the native people and resources that they find in a given area. Hibaro finds that the siren is covered in this outfit thing, bodysuit, whatever it is actually almost like fish scales, and they're gold. And so he kills her and literally scales her. It's bloody. It's awful. It's really rough to watch. And boy, if that's not just hammering you over the head with, colonial destruction of native culture, murder of native people, stealing of their resources, I don't know what is. So you've got greed killing everybody on the planet in the first episode, greed killing natives via colonization and murder in the last episode. And there's a few others that, fit around that theme of colonization and capitalism and greed. The Swarm. The Swarm is all about somebody trying to figure out how to turn what they believe these completely mindless aliens living in a zero G but oxygen rich environment into worker drones and slaves, because they're all different castes and drones and warriors and so on. They're very much like a beehive or an anthill, except they're not intelligent. They are deliberately only intelligent when it needs to be something they use for survival. And so that's a story about humans trying to exploit this, species it discovers, and turn them into slaves, essentially. So yeah, there's a lot of not really subtle stuff going on here about slavery and colonialism and greed and capitalism. So there is a theme running across this whole thing. And again, not every episode does this, but quite a few of them do. So I just realized, looking at the credits here for The Very Pulse of the Machine, the one that Utsav and I think look very much like heavy metal cartoon or comics, was made by Polygon Pictures out of Japan. Polygon, who has done so much of the 3D CG work, so I guess this must be CG, that you see in an awful lot of anime and a lot of really popular anime. So, wow, that's a kind of a surprise. But yeah, so it is very much in and around other just, gee, that's fun action, like, Kill Team Kill, and so on, or, Night of the Mini Dead or Mason's Rats. Um, it's a lot of, hey, capitalism kills a lot of people. We sucked because we did a lot of this stuff. Now, a lot of it's in fantasy stories or science fiction stories in this particular volume, but it's all, nail on head. Um, so, I don't know, if you don't want to see people call that out, don't watch them. But, it's the truth. Told, obviously, in allegory, in fantasy and science fiction stories. So that's pretty much it, folks. That's my take on Love, Death, and Robots Volume 3. Do I recommend it? Yeah. It's gory, so I recommend it with the caveat that if you don't like violence and gore, you probably shouldn't be watching it. Or find someplace that can give you specific gore ratings for some episodes. It's not particularly profane. There's not a ton of swearing. There's no lewdness in it to speak of. So that would be my real only warning. And I mean, some of the episodes are really scary, monster story type scary. But yeah, so I would definitely heartily recommend it to anybody who's a fan of any kind of speculative fiction, science fiction, fantasy, horror, what have you. Watch this. It's 9 episodes. It's roughly the equivalent of 2 movies. Maybe not even all the way to 2 movies. So it's really easy to get to or get through, and it's just fantastic. Where would I put this on a scale of 1 to 10? It's really hard to say. So if I'm gonna sort of aggregate, you know what? I'm not going to do that. What I will do is on a scale of Volume 1 to Volume 2 to Volume 3. I think this is the best one. Because it's more consistent, it's tighter, it's longer than Volume 2, but it's not as crazy long as Volume 1. So I'm going to give this one the best of all 3 volumes. Volume 1 next, and then, Volume 2 was just too disappointing and too many times. So that's the way I'll rate this. Having said that, we're all done with the show. We've got a couple of little bits of promo stuff and housekeeping to talk about. Of course, we always want to push our Patreon page. Encourage you to go visit patreon.com/nerdcaliber. We'd love to have you check it out. We'd really love to have you be a patron. Help us get to more cons as we go back into the con season. Knock wood, I managed to... I just tested this morning. It's 4 days out of Sunday, which is the last day of Anime Boston. Miss getting COVID out of another con. So cons are coming back. We want to get to cons. That's what this money goes to help us do. 3 tiers, $2 for the lowest tier. Check it out. Consider becoming a patron. We'd love to have you. Now, I would normally at this point be talking about our other upcoming shows, but the big news is... going forward, now that cons are coming back, and we don't need to fill YouTube's airwaves with my face, we're going to scale back to just Nerd Week Live on Tuesday nights as our one regular live show. And we're going to be making some changes to that. It's going to be more of a tighter focused, just a handful of topics, so we can go deeper into topics that need deeper discussion. We might wind up devoting some shows to, or half or a big chunk of shows to what would be the equivalent of a full fat spoiler chat. I am absolutely positive that people will want to talk about Stranger Things after July 1st, when the second block of it happens. So we may either put that onto one of the Nerd Week Live shows on Tuesday. We may bring back a special Nerd Week Live that is like one of these full fat spoiler chat on a different night for that 1 week. But it will be Nerd Week Live. So we might have 2 Nerd Week Lives that week with 2 different topics. But that's it. The rest of these shows, No Nerd Caliber, Anime Octane, and Full Fat Spoiler Chat, are done. This is the last one. So thank you, everybody who ever chatted along with us or watched these live or after the fact. Let's thank you very much for all your wonderful chat and input tonight. Habibi, thanks for being there on the YouTubes. And that's it. We will see you next Tuesday with Nerd Week Live for 3 to 5 topics, 5 max, probably closer to 3 or 4, where we can dig into them deeper and more in depth. And then we'll see you at upcoming cons. PortCon Maine in June 24th through the 26th is, I think, our next one. Then we're Terrificon. Then we're Kineticon. Then we're Terrificon in July. Then we're Fan Expo Boston and Pop Cult Anime Con. And then, of course, from that point on, it's a whole ton of things right through to the end of the year. Assuming some other variant doesn't come in and kick us in the butt. Anyway, we'll see you at an upcoming con. And next week at